This is a quick discussion about the classing for underwater habitats. It's an excerpt taken from the documentation from underwater vehicles, systems, and hyperbaric facilities. I will also tag the actual document so that if anybody wants to read further on this topic, they can. Enjoy.
Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendan Traxler.
Ever dreamt of living under the sea? Like full-on Atlantis style? Well, today's deep dive might just convince you it's closer than you think. We're going deep on the rules for building underwater habitats, the ABS rules for building and classing underwater vehicles, systems, and hyperbaric facilities, the 2021 edition, to be precise.
Yeah, these are the nuts and bolts of how to design a livable space hundreds of feet below the surface. And not just for a quick visit. We're talking weeks, months, maybe even years at a time.
So it's one thing to imagine, right, but another entirely to engineer it. Where do we even begin with something like that?
Well, it all starts with the structure itself, what the rules call pressure vessels for human occupancy, or PVHOs for short. Imagine for a second being inside a balloon hundreds of feet underwater.
Okay, now I'm feeling a tad claustrophobic.
Well, that balloon, that's your only protection against the immense pressure at those depths. Every seam, every bolt, every window absolutely has to hold. These rules define what those pressure vessels need to withstand to keep humans alive inside.
So not as simple as just dropping a metal box into the ocean, then. What makes these pressure vessels so special?
It's about creating a completely sealed environment, one that can handle that constant crushing pressure. And I don't just mean the big stuff either. We're talking tiny details. Like even the hatches just getting in and out, those are meticulously designed.
Speaking of hatches, Section 5.1.3 really caught my eye. Because it's not just about having a door, is it? They get surprisingly specific about the size. 610 millimeters diameter for normal entry, but a full 711 millimeters for emergency escape. Why the difference?
Every millimeter counts in a crisis, right?
Yeah.
Imagine squeezing through that hatch in full diving gear. Maybe you're panicking. Maybe you're carrying injured crew. Maybe you're being pulled through yourself. Those extra millimeters, they could be a lifesaver.
And it doesn't stop there. The rules also insist that hatches be operable from both sides, inside and out. Seems like a small detail, but I'm guessing crucial down there.
Absolutely. Redundancy equals safety in these situations. Imagine someone inside is injured, can't reach the hatch, or a rescue team needs to get in quickly. That dual access suddenly becomes critical.
Okay, so we've talked about the pressure, getting in and out. What about the essential staying alive part once you're inside?
Well, that's where things get really interesting and surprisingly complex. Let's just say, breathing is only the beginning.
Section 5.7, let me tell you, real eye-opener.
It's a whole lot more than just having enough air to breathe. We're talking about, like, recreating an entire self-sufficient environment down there.
Yeah, and one of the first things that jumped out at me, right, was the 72-hour rule. Both the main and backup life support have to sustain the whole crew for at least 72 hours. That's longer than some people's emergency kits.
Well, think about it. If something goes wrong a mile underwater, you can't exactly dial 911. 72 hours buys you time. Time for rescue, dealing with complications. Down there, self-sufficiency is everything.
And one thing they've got to be self-sufficient for is getting rid of CO2. Section 5.7.3, it gets into the nitty-gritty there, and wow, more involved than I ever imagined.
It's easy to forget, right, every time we exhale. That's CO2. Now imagine being sealed up, nowhere for it to go. Builds up fast, even small increases. Bad news.
So it's like you got to pack out your trash when you're camping, but with your breath.
Exactly. These habitats, they rely on what they call scrubbing systems, like high-tech air filters, but for your breath. Constantly scrubbing the air, keeping that CO2 down.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's something else that surprised me. Section 5.7.2F, it's about the gas systems and how important it is to prevent oxygen mixing with other gases. Now, I know mixing gases is bad, but why such a big deal under pressure?
Because in a pressurized habitat, pure oxygen, it's basically rocket fuel. One stray spark and, well, that's why the rules are so strict about those systems. Every valve, every seal got to be perfect to prevent leaks or mixes.
So to recap, We've got to worry about being crushed, having something to breathe, and not accidentally turning the place into a giant oxygen bomb. What else could there be?
Oh, how about the fact that even underwater, you can't escape the danger of dot fire?
Wait, fire underwater? I thought that was impossible.
Yeah, it does sound kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? But when you think about it, some of these habitats, they might be using pure oxygen, right? Suddenly, fire's a real risk.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense when you put it like that. But still, if a fire starts, how do you even put it out underwater? Like, forget the extinguisher. Can you even use water?
That's where it gets really tricky. Section 5.13.1a, it lays down the law, so to speak, on firefighting systems. And yeah, they're strict. No toxic extinguishing agents allowed, for one thing.
Well, yeah, obviously. Don't want to survive the fire just to get taken out by the fumes.
Right. Got to be thinking long-term in this kind of environment about the knock-on effects of every decision and about using water. It's not as simple as you'd think. Salt water, especially, can actually cause more problems than it solves.
Seriously. I figured salt water would be the obvious choice.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But these habitats, they're made of metal. Salt water, super corrosive. You start spraying that around, you might end up damaging the very thing you're trying to protect. Plus, believe it or not, salt water's not even that great at putting out certain types of fires. Every detail matters in a contained, controlled space like that.
So let's see, we've covered surviving the pressure, breathing, fire. Did we miss anything? Oh, right, the whole actually living down there part.
Exactly. Surviving is one thing, but thriving, long-term, that's a whole different ballgame. Section 5.15, that's what they get into layout and outfitting. And it is surprisingly detailed, let me tell you.
Like, for example, there's a minimum lighting requirement, 270 lumens per square meter. I've worked in offices with worse lighting.
Light, it's essential, right, for our physical and mental health. And when you can't just, step outside for some sun, maintaining that bright light, it becomes vital. Mood regulation, sleep cycles, even just preventing eye strain.
Yeah, that makes sense. Though I guess there's not much room for mood lighting with those kinds of rules. You know what really got me, though? It sounds silly, but it's the stuff I never even thought about. Like, what about going to the bathroom?
Yes, the glamorous side of underwater habitation. They actually dedicate a whole section to that. 5.15.34 tab.
And it turns out, even that gets complicated at depth. Who knew toilets could be so high-tech? Flushing systems that need 2 actions to prevent accidents with the pressure.
Gotta think, even a toilet flush has to be redesigned for that environment, right?
Yeah.
Can't have any mistakes under pressure. And that whole thing with containment we talked about earlier, it applies here too. Everything needs to be managed. No just flushing it away and forgetting about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, this deep dive really made me rethink those dreams of underwater cities. It's not just breathing down there, it's about recreating every little detail of life support in a completely alien world.
It really is incredible when you think about it. The level of detail in these rules, it's astounding. Every valve, every hatch, every system meticulously designed to keep people alive in one of the most extreme environments imaginable.
It really makes you appreciate the ingenuity, the sheer determination it takes to push those boundaries. So will we ever see those self-sustaining underwater cities of science fiction, or are we stuck with these metal tubes for the foreseeable future? That, my friends, is a question for another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring the wonders of the world, both above and below the surface.